And welcome, Hoosier Nation, to our 142nd episode of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. We are recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Tuesday evening, May 19th, 2020, where I am your host, Noah Freeman. For some reason, I thought I said May 19th, so I thought I said 2019. But no, it's just May 19th, 2020. But as I struggle through the introduction that we do every single week, that I do every single week, on the docket for tonight, Khristian Lander officially reclassified to the class of 2020. Obviously everyone has talked about it. We've even mentioned it on episodes before. The Khristian Lander news came live. He committed to Indiana University during our show, however long ago it was, on the spot. So we talked about him live on the air as soon as he committed. But now it's official. We don't have to speculate. Will he be able to come this next year, or is he going to have to, I guess, sit out a year? Is a different way of saying just take his senior year. But he's officially skipping his senior year. He's going to come on campus this fall, whenever that may be. So we're just going to talk about Khristian Lander and some expectations for him and the team, basically. But here with me tonight, as always, the gang is here with me. So, Matt, how are you taking the news that Khristian Lander, another scholarship spot, a 5-star recruit, is now going to be on campus this fall, 2020?
I mean, I'm taking it well. I don't know how every other Hoosier fan is taking it. If you're taking it not well, I don't know what's wrong with you. I mean, it's nothing but good news. As we've seen before, and there's a GIF floating around on social media of my face celebrating Khristian Lander committing. I've been happy about this from the beginning. It's just nice that it's official now. It's kind of relieving to know that he got all his schoolwork done. I don't know if he had to take the SAT or not. That's a weird situation that I'm not sure of right now because with obviously the coronavirus, not being able to go into testing centers. My mom, who works at a high school, swears to me that you can go and take your SAT online, but I feel like that's bogus. It's not the SAT if you're not having to go take the SAT at 7 a.m. in the morning at your dingy high school on a Saturday. That's not
for 6 hours.
Right, for 6 hours. That's not the SAT. You can take it from the comfort of your home. That's too bougie, as the kids say. So, no, I mean, I'm glad it's all done. I'm glad he's able to come. He's going to be a fantastic addition. I will talk later on about how some people think he's going to be the backup point guard. I think he's going to be a starter. He's not going to be reclassifying as a 5-star recruit coming in and not starting and or getting starters minutes. Who knows if he comes off the bench, starts, or whatever. But he's going to have a major role in this team. And I'm excited for him to be wearing cream and crimson. How about you, Nathan?
Yeah, I mean, it's big news for Indiana basketball. It's not so much that Lander committed to the Hoosiers. Like you said, we were recording. Actually, you two guys were recording live when that came down a few months ago. But the news that he's reclassifying to 2020 is now set in stone for all we're curious about. His national letter of intent is in, and basically we've got a 5-star point guard on the roster. Starting in fall 2020. It's not going to be, a life-changing type of development. Khristian Lander coming to Indiana all of a sudden isn't going to make the Hoosiers the number one team in the country. It does not make Indiana a national title lock by any means. So we're going to go into all the different sort of consequences and the impacts of Lander's reclassification into 2020. But it's definitely exciting news for IU basketball, especially considering Lander's Evansville kid. So, recruiting the state, always a priority for Archie Miller. So gold star for Archie in that department as well.
All right, so let's get into some specifics about how Khristian Lander can help this 2020-2021. The 2020s are going to be a very interesting decade to say all those years for. But let's get a little more specifics with Khristian Lander, and let's start with some expectations for him personally, and not just the team. So how he can contribute and what we might expect from him, because I think all of us, not just Archie and the team, but all Hoosier fans learned a lot from the Romeo Langford commitment and his year on campus at Indiana University, for better or for worse. And I mean, as in Hoosier fans learning how the Archie Miller era is going to handle those not just 5-star recruits, but top tier 5-star recruits. Because you got Trace Jackson Davis, but you've got these top tier, top 5, top 3 type of recruits coming in. So let's talk about some expectations for him. I think we mentioned this on air when he originally committed, that we probably shouldn't expect as much as maybe we did from Romeo Langford. And we had a couple of reasons for that. Number one being, I think the main reason we shouldn't expect maybe necessarily Romeo Langford output is because that's just not the type of player he is. He's a guy that's going to be able to facilitate the ball more than be a guy like Romeo Langford, where most of his main job, or his biggest job at least, was to score. So Matt, talk a little bit about, because I know you agreed with me here on this way. Khristian Lander at least coming in and having the impact, the scoring impact, which sometimes scoring is equated to basically how well you do on a team. How is that impact with him maybe not necessarily being a scoring first 17-year-old on campus going to affect what we should expect from him?
I mean, yeah, he's not Romeo. Romeo was a year older. And I'll preface my entire argument for Lander. I still think he'll score a lot. In fact, I think he might be our main go-to scorer in crunch time. At least playmaker-wise, he'll have the ball in his hands in crunch time, ready to go, whether it's running pick and roll with Trace Jackson Davis, or it's running a bit of off screens or backdoor with Rob Finney having the ball. He's going to be our scorer when it comes to the guards, especially if it's going to be him and Rob Finney on the court together. However, he is 17 years old when he's going into college and doesn't have an extra year of growth and maturity. And then, as Jeff just said in the chat, we're a little apprehensive about this season, mainly because what are they going to get from this off season, right? Like, are they going to be able to go into the team facility and work out? Is he going to be able to work with Cliff Marshall, one of the best weight trainers in college basketball, to get his body ready? And again, he's still a year younger than a normal college freshman would be. So he's still a year of high school conditioning, a year of maturity behind everyone else. So he's not going to come in. He's not going to be a defensive stopper. He's not going to be able to take the hits that Romeo was able to take. Like, Romeo was a wonderful inside threat. Whenever he was cutting, he was able to finish at the rim and get and ones. I don't think we're going to see a lot of that from Khristian. He's not going to be able to finish through contact as well as Romeo did, but he's going to be a influential part when it comes to scoring on this team. It's just going to be more of his shooting than cutting when compared to Romeo. Right, Nathan?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, taking a step back, if you look at the 24/7 Sports profile on Lander, he's a 6'1", 160-pound left-handed point guard. I can't remember off the top of my head the last lefty point guard Indiana had. I would not say Al Durham is a point guard, but what this, is so it's interesting to look at that. If you look at the profile further, it says he's an explosive athlete. He's a good ball handler. He knows how to find his teammates, but maybe reading between the lines, it seems like the jump shooting and the scoring ability will have to be developed once he comes to IU. So one thing we're going to talk about over the next few minutes here, at least one thing I'm going to talk about, is tempering expectations for Lander as much as possible in year one, because in general, it's tough enough to be a highly recruited, highly regarded point guard transitioning from high school to college basketball. It's even tougher to do it when you're doing it a year earlier than anticipated. And then it's even tougher when you're joining a team that already has some established veterans. And hey, as far as Indiana basketball is concerned, you're going to have a number of sophomores and juniors in the starting lineup next year, even a couple of seniors most likely. So the transition is going to be difficult, but make no mistake about it. What Lander will do, if you ask me, is really elevate the competition across the board, especially in the backcourt at Indiana. This is a alarm signal to players like Rob Finney and Al Durham specifically, who've gotten their feet wet at IU. Finney's going to be a junior in the fall. The other player, Durham, will be a senior in the fall. Those guys are on alert now. Like, you have to, if you haven't already, you have to put the work in on the side to elevate your game. If it's a guy like Rob Finney, find another move or two offensively to get a few more points per game on the board. If you're Al Durham, maybe you've got to connect on a few more threes, increase that 3-point percentage, or elevate your defensive play. And it's not like those players aren't good at scoring or defense. It's nothing like that. But the alarm signal has been sent out now. Khristian Lander is going to come in, and he's going to try to take your playing time. And there's no question already, when you look at the comments made by Archie Miller and Khristian Lander after the news of Lander's reclassification, those two guys have a really strong connection. It seemed like there was a lot of positive sentiment from both Archie Miller and Khristian Lander on what it means for both to have each other around the next year or 2 or 3. I don't know how long Lander's going to be in Bloomington, but that's a different conversation. There's going to be a lot of competition in that backcourt. Hopefully for Indiana basketball, it's a situation where all three guys benefit. And that's before you include some other pieces like Armaan Franklin or Anthony Leal.
So, Nathan, what should those expectations for him specifically be? Is that going to be something where fans should look at a stat line where he should be going like 10 and 5, as in 10 points, 5 assists, or should it be more of not looking at the stats and maybe looking at the intangibles, some of the stuff he's doing on the court?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is yes. I think the answer is that there is a statistical component to it. There is an intangible component to it. Heck, this is a player who, if you look at the scouting report, he's also a good rebounder for his position. He'll get steals as well. So, if you look back over the years, if you look, Khristian Lander, according to the 2020 recruiting rankings, will come in as somewhere around the 25th rated prospect in high school basketball going into his true freshman season. It's really interesting to look back on some of the players who are rated around that 25 mark who are point guards. Okay. If I asked you listening, probably not just an Indiana basketball fan, but probably a college basketball fan, who Trey Mann is. I know both of you two guys know a lot about college basketball. What do you know about Trey Mann?
I know that he's the point guard or a backup point guard for the University of Florida, but I would only know that because I follow University of Florida basketball, and he was a former IU basketball recruiting target. However, if that was not the case, I wouldn't know who you were talking about because you didn't play that much for Florida this year.
Well, so that's the thing. And Trey Mann, he was the 21st overall prospect in the 2019 recruiting rankings, point guard. He went into a tough situation at Florida, and not tough as in, the program struggling, but tough as in very competitive. And last year he averaged 18 minutes a game, 5 points, and less than an assist per game. Okay. He's a point guard. Okay. And remember, he didn't reclassify a year earlier. Okay. Now, are there examples of point guards doing a great job? Sure. If you look at 2018, Kobe White went to North Carolina, around the 25th rated prospect, and he had a really good season. He averaged 16 points a game, solid rebounder, solid distributor of the basketball, went in the top 10 to the Bulls in the draft. If you look a year earlier, Nick Weatherspoon of Mississippi State, guy you may not have heard of, okay? He averaged 10 points per game over his first 3 seasons and then declared early for the NBA draft, and he's hoping for the best. Ultimately, these are all over the board. And when you look at Indiana with Rob Finney there and Al Durham and Armaan Franklin and Anthony Leal, Khristian Lander, if he cracks double digits in scoring, I would be shocked. That's just the way I see it, okay? I'm looking at somebody who's going to come in and learn the system. Remember, Archie Miller's offense is not everyone play playground style basketball. It's very regimented. It's very strict. It's very choreographed. And Lander's going to have to learn those things in year 1. So I'm expecting statistically 8 points per game, couple rebounds, couple assists. I'm not expecting shockingly amazing numbers from Lander, especially considering he's coming in a year earlier. So, that's the stat side. The intangibles, I could see, I just want to see improvement. I think something we saw from Trace Jackson Davis last year would be encouraging. So, Matt, let me ask you the same question. What are you looking at statistically from Lander? And then what are you looking at as far as intangibles and development from him as well?
Let me butt in real quick, just to clarify. And his composite 24/7 composite ranking currently as of Tuesday night is 25th. The 24/7 Sports is 24th. I'm sorry, 25th. You're right. Composite's 25th. 24/7 is 24th. So he's right, like Nathan said, right, the 25th for the 2020 class. When he was in 2021, he was obviously a lot higher because he was a year later developed. And right now he's got to battle kids that are a year obviously older than him. So sorry, just clarifying that thing. So yeah, Matt, what are you expecting maybe for more of that statistical numbers? What, like, if you were to put a number on his true freshman season as a 17 to 18-year-old, what would you kind of give him for points and assists and maybe even some rebounds?
That's a really tough thing to predict. I mean, there's a lot of things that are tough that we predict and try to put our neck out on the line here on the Hoosier Sound, but this is right up there. Look, it's very hard to tell you how Archie's going to run the offense, where the ball is going to go, who's going to get the ball when. I mean, heck, we don't even know like what the starting lineup is going to be next year, let alone how many minutes he's going to play. However, a successful season for Khristian Lander, for me, are as follows. Is he on the court at the end of the game? If he's on the court at the end of the game in crunch prime moments when we need him, does he have the ball in his hands? Is Rob Finney showing his little bit of what he improved on last year and as a spot-up shooter off the ball? Are plays being run for him at like backdoor cuts, half of his highlight reels, if you go and see them online, or him making a backdoor cut for an alley-oop or a lay-in? Is that something he's doing? Is he running pick and roll with Trace Jackson Davis? Like, that's the first statistical, like, what is his usage rate for like the last 10 minutes of a game? Then the second category I'm looking for is total wins for the team. If he comes in and improves the team, that is a successful year. I'm not looking for 8 points per game, 3 rebounds, 2.5 assists. That's my best guess, honestly. I like right around where Nathan had, if I had to pick out statistics. But really, I'm looking at what's his usage rate in the last 10 minutes of the game, and the total wins number and losses, so the total overall record of the team. Are we in a better place after next year than we were this year? And I think the answer will be yes. And in fact, I think he'll have a fantastic year. He's not going to be a home run hitter when he first gets on campus. It's going to take him until February, early March for us to see the best of Khristian Lander. But I'm really excited to see what he brings to this team. But yeah, 8 points, 3 rebounds, about 2.5 assists per game is probably where I'd put it.
Especially since no one actually knows whether this team will be able to even meet as a team with everything going on until potentially August, September, October. So we don't even know when he might actually be able to get just with the program in general. And it's still obviously different than meeting with the team virtually and getting some virtual workouts. But yeah, BMC on our YouTube chat said Romeo, like again, the Romeo comparison, because he's that kind of elite caliber high school recruit. Romeo was 6'6", fourth-time all-time scorer in IHSAA history. A year older, played 34 minutes per game, which was 16.5 points per game. He says he's very excited to see Khristian Lander's elite quickness, handling, etc., but give him time. He says he agrees with us. So that's to at least see those statistical aspects. I think we're going to try and, again, like Matt said, what is he doing? How is he actually facilitating? And we'll kind of transition somewhat into the expectations for the team, and also kind of his role on next year's team is also going to kind of be up in the air, because originally, if he would have come in the class of 2021, Rob would have been a senior, and they kind of play the same type of position. They're more or less very cut and dry. I'm saying this very cut and dry. They play the same type of point guard style. They're both of them are not a point guard like a Russell Westbrook that's going to go and score first or something. They're going to facilitate the ball a little more before they try and score. That's not to say that they don't try and score. You see Rob all the time drive into the lane. Well, when he wasn't injured, and that's a whole other story. Typical good Rob, you could see him drive into the lane and score, but he's a guy that you're going to want to try and see more of the Yogi side, where he's facilitating the ball. So you've got next year where you've got a junior Rob Finney, a Rob Finney that struggled during his sophomore year, whether it was injury related or not. He still struggled during his sophomore year and didn't make the jump that we all expected. And here comes Khristian Lander, more or less playing the same position. So even if they play on the same lineup, which we're going to talk about lineups here in a little bit, Nathan, what do you think Khristian Lander might be doing on this team? Like, let's just say he and Rob are the quote unquote 1 and 2s. They're the two smaller point guards. What do you think is going to be? Do you think it's going to be Rob handling the ball more? Do you think it's going to be reversed where Khristian takes the ball up and Rob's going to be more in a I don't know, backup facilitator / shooter type of role? What do you see him coming into?
Yeah, that's a tough question. And that's where I think it's really important to know, and we're not going to get an answer on this, but to know what kind of vision Archie Miller has for how these pieces fit. What does assistant coach Mike Roberts expect to see out of Archie Miller and Rob Finney? And that's where it's out of Khristian Lander and Rob Finney, I should say. It's going to be interesting. On the surface, I look at it as more, hey, Lander is your offensive injection type point guard. Finney's your defensive guard stopper. Okay. And maybe that's oversimplifying it, but that's how I see them fit. But hey, look, there was a point pretty late last season where Rob Finney was a 40% 3-point shooter. Okay. It tailed off right at the end. But at a point there in I believe February or March, he was a 40% 3-point shooter. I don't expect Lander to be hitting that number this season. So if nothing else, Lander's addition to the team in the fall will at least give Indiana a little bit more of a margin for error, a little bit more buffer. In other words, if Rob Finney does sustain an injury, well, now he can take a couple extra games to heal. Or if it's a serious injury, Lander is capable of filling in for Finney compared to last season where, you say Devontae Green was there, and he was, but the depth and the skill level at the guard position was lacking. So it's going to take some time to adapt. And look, nothing's official yet, but the non-conference slate for Indiana this fall is going to be a little bit tougher than it was last fall. So there's going to be some adjustment period. There's going to be an adaptation time. I do envision, though, when it's all said and done, like when you get into Big Ten season in January and February, that Lander and Finney are going to fit. There's very little friction that I anticipate going on there. Both guys seem to have a great attitude. They seem to be good communicators. That's where I think they will really improve each other rather than really clash against each other.
Yeah, and I like you said, especially with the depth part, I think a lot of Hoosier fans kind of have a little bit of a sigh of relief because whether you classify Leal and Galloway as technical point guards, shooting guards, as a guard, or if you classify them more as a forward, this definitely gives you more of that facilitator, the ball handler facilitator depth, if anything, because you don't have to go, if Rob goes down, the next guy is what, Al? And Al can sometimes be a great point guard, but I mean, he's not a guy that thrives taking the ball up the court, basically. So it definitely gives them depth, if anything. So let's move into specific expectations for the team. I think we obviously can agree, and I think everyone can agree, this, if anything, elevates the expectations for this team. And I think the addition of Khristian Lander, if anything, we had a floor. I think we all expected still, even with or without Khristian Lander, this team to get back to, and I'll say back to with confidence because they were going to make the tournament this year, back to the tournament next year. And if anything, I think it just raises the potential that they have, because I mean, it's kind of like what we talked about this past year with Jerome Hunter. Anything we got was kind of icing on the cake, the cherry on top. Anything we got was extra. In a little bit, it kind of with their end game, the end of the season, their end of the year record, how far they go in the tournament. Anything we get from Lander could kind of just elevate that a little more. So maybe they sneak into the tournament. Maybe they win a game or two in the tournament this year because of Lander. Matt, how do you think Lander coming into this team, because we're tempering expectations with what we could see from him, obviously, just because he's such a young guy coming onto this team, how much does this elevate the expectations for this team, or does it elevate it at all?
I think it elevates it just a little bit. When I made my predictions for this team earlier on when we were talking about next year, I included Khristian Lander in my evaluation just because I thought this was nothing but a formality. This was going to happen. But now that it's happened, I am a little bit of excited. So I'm let the excitement get to my head because we need excitement and happiness in these times. So
Yeah.
look,
And
teams,
news.
Exactly, right. We need news. We need stuff to talk about. So here it goes. We'll be competing for a top 3 place in the Big Ten next year, with the likes of Wisconsin and Iowa, who are 2 very great teams, and Illinois if Iowa comes back, but that's a whole other story. Look, the teams that do well in this league, in the Big Ten, and just in the country in general, have consistent point guard play. What this allows Indiana to do is to have a decent point guard on the court at all times. Kind of the Houston Rockets approach, back when they had Chris Paul and James Harden. People were like, how are they going to work together? They both need the ball. Well, the point is you played one at one time and one at another time, and the other one learned how to play off the ball together. That is what is going to happen with these two, and that's what usually happens when you play 2 point guards at the same time, something that Archie Miller has done previously at Dayton. When he ran 2 point guards, he had 2 double point guard system. It works. As long as you have a point guard that's willing to be the scorer and the other one that's willing to be the facilitator, that works out well. They can both share one ball. And that's what I think is going to happen this year. So I'm expecting IU to not only surpass this season's win mark, but to challenge in the Big Ten, place top 3, and look at like a 5 or 6 seed in the tournament, looking at a second weekend NCAA tournament berth, which will be nice, not only because we get to actually watch the NCAA tournament next year, but because the Hoosiers will be doing well in it. I think a second weekend tournament berth is very much realistic for this team if everything meshes the way that I think it will.
Nathan, do you have anything to add for that? And then why don't you actually just give us your who won the week after you talk about the expectations?
Yeah, sure thing. Remind me if I forget, because I'm excited to let all of you listening. I'm excited to let you guys know what I think. So I said the expectations for Lander need to be sort of depressed a little, but they need to be lowered. Here's how I look at it. Okay, Indiana basketball next season will be impacted a lot more by the kind of improvements guys like Al Durham and Rob Finney and Justin Smith and Trace Jackson Davis make, okay? So here's the thing. As somebody who watched every single game last year and every single game the year before, I see those 4 players that I mentioned capable of doing a lot more than what they're doing right now, okay? I mean, I'm talking about, Al Durham being a reliable 35-minute per game guy hitting a bunch of threes for you. I'm talking about Justin Smith, who looks like an NBA player. If you saw Justin Smith across the street, you would say, wow, this guy should be in the NBA already, okay? And he's capable of being so much more, especially if you ask me, in the steals and blocks department. I think defensively he can be a real annoyance. So those are just a couple of examples. And then we talked, I think, a couple of weeks ago about, hey, what if Trace Jackson Davis develops a semblance of a mid-range jump shot? What if Trace Jackson Davis all of a sudden develops another post move inside? Okay, I think Indiana's ceiling is really high next year. That's what this all comes down to. Okay, the Big Ten's going to be worse. And you mentioned, Matt, top 3 in the conference. Really outside of Iowa, Wisconsin, and Michigan State, the rest of the conference is very beatable. And Michigan State lost Cassius Winston. I mean, that's going to be, you talk about adaptation for Indiana, that's going to be an adjustment for the Spartans. I think Indiana,
on a point guard specifically, losing that point guard that you
and you're talking
about.
Senior, right? Senior.
Guards, yep.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So when I look at Indiana, especially if they're able to notch a couple of really big non-conference wins, like Indiana plays Butler early next year, they're going to have a tough matchup in the ACC Challenge. They're going to get a matchup in the Gavitt games, a Big East opponent in the fall. At least that's what the rumors are. And it makes plenty of sense because Indiana didn't have one last year. I think IU's got a Final Four type of ceiling if you see guys like Justin Smith and Al Durham and Rob Finney and Trace Jackson Davis really elevate their game. Khristian Lander allows for Indiana basketball to play with a safer cushion. And I think that's really important because all of a sudden now your success and failure isn't hinging on 1 or 2 guys getting hurt. With the Big Ten getting worse and contingent on a few significant improvements. I'm talking Justin Smith becoming a 13-point per game type of player. I'm talking about Al Durham becoming a 40% type 3-point shooter. Those two guys specifically are capable of that. Will we see it? I don't know. But I'm excited about what Indiana basketball can be next year, especially when you consider it's probably Trace Jackson Davis's last season at Indiana. So, talk about striking while the iron's hot. I think Indiana is capable of doing great things next season.
I also don't want to necessarily all of this temper expectation stuff with Khristian Lander kind of downplay anything that he will potentially bring. I think we're just talking about this specifically for the 2020-2021 season, but then after that, his ceiling as The Last Dance just finished, MJ himself, the ceiling is the roof. That he could explode as a player, and that's his sophomore year, what would have been his true freshman season, is where he could explode and become that NBA type of talent that we could see, and then all bets are off the table as a good thing. Let him run free just because he's so young. He's going to be in a completely new system, especially with that pack line defense that it takes you a minute to get used to. All of those factors, let alone potentially not even be able to get on campus as early as you might like to, all those factors, just wait even half a year, if anything, at minimum half a year before seeing some sort of explosion from him.
I mean, yeah, if he's here for 1 year and goes to the NBA, that means we had one heck of a year, okay? Folks, like that means he had a year in which the NBA said you're a guaranteed first round pick. And if that's the case, like, Nathan's Final Four prediction might be a little too low. Like that's what I'm talking about, folks. But no, Lander, we're talking about Lander. He's going to be here next year. We're going to love watching him. But I have a feeling he'll be back after next year and actually have a freshman year of college. This is going to be his senior year, but he plays for a college team. And then his freshman year of college, he's going to have a year of experience under his belt. He's going to know all the players. He's played with them. He's going to know the system. He's going to be familiar with the pack line defense and the plays that are run in the offense. And hopefully he gets to play with his buddy Trey Kaufman. And we're looking at a wonderfully exciting next or year after this year. So as the 2021-2022 season. So that's something to look forward to. However, that being said, if what Nathan says is true or could happen, and Justin Smith becomes a 13-point per game scorer in the Big Ten, I am putting this bold prediction that if that happens, Justin Smith is a second-team All-Big Ten player for the Big Ten, because I think his defense is going to be good next year, especially being a senior, his fourth year in the pack line. And if he can average 13 points per game and be that go-to scorer for IU, which means he improved his jump shot, let's all be honest, we're looking at a prime NBA prospect and an all Big Ten performer in Justin Smith. So I really hope that does come true. I'm tempering my expectations on Justin Smith until he can prove me otherwise, but I'm really excited to see what he can bring this senior year.
Yep, and just to add on to that, BMC in our chat again, is AAU familiar with Trace? Leal and Galloway is also encouraging. Pretty small backcourt defensively with Rob and Khristian Lander if they can play together, but the quickness, wow, Archie and his staff deserve big credit. Yes, completely agree with that. Yep. All right, let's go on to Nathan, who won the week. So if you guys aren't familiar with this segment of our show, we basically like to go sometimes. We don't necessarily talk about basketball and or football all the time. We get to highlight some other programs or some other things that are happening with just IU and IU sports. So we talk about kind of who won the week this last week in Indiana sports.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, COVID-19 might be going on right now and the pandemic might be happening, but that hasn't stopped students, especially student athletes, from doing the schoolwork. It still has to be done, even if it's virtual. And there was news that came down earlier today, and we're recording on Tuesday, that IU set a very high mark as far as their annual APR is concerned. It was graded out of 1,000. And 13 out of IU's 22 student athlete programs, so you're talking about basketball and swimming and stuff like that, 13 out of 22 posted an APR of 1,000. And in fact, it's the 7th consecutive year where IU overall has either set or tied an athletics department record as far as APR is concerned. So it's a little formula that goes into it, but basically it's, hey, how are your student athletes doing in the classroom? A lot of times, in fact, there's a rule out there that if you don't have a certain APR level, you don't qualify for the NCAA tournament. And Indiana's never been in jeopardy of that. They continue to trend upwards. In fact, men's basketball was one of the 13 programs that recorded a 1,000 out of 1,000 rating. So it's very exciting to see. In fact, all of IU's 22 programs recorded that they met that threshold that you need in order to participate in the NCAA tournament in whatever sport you're in. So really cool news. I mean, I know COVID-19 has been kind of tough on people, but it looks like over the last few years, IU student athletes have really put in the schoolwork.
Yeah, which is an awesome thing, and it's really cool, especially with, like you said, Nathan, everything going on. It's still good to get good news and just normalcy basically coming through everything. All right, let's get into some lineup possibilities. And I don't want to go too far into the rabbit hole or talk about this too greatly in depth, usually coming closer to the season, especially when there's also still a chance of stuff happening on this team. There's a scholarship spot left open, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit as well. Later closer to the beginning of basketball season, we have an entire podcast, so an entire 30, 45 hour of time to go deep into the lineup possibilities, but I kind of want to scratch the surface with how Khristian might fit into this. And we kind of mentioned this a little bit already, and I think the biggest question is going to be, you've got a 5-star recruit, no matter how young he is, coming in with Khristian Lander. You've got Rob Finney, assuming and hoping that he takes those leaps that we wanted to see from his freshman to sophomore year, hoping that he's going to be that dominant starting point guard. You've got the senior now in Al Durham, who has had and shown stretches of being a great basketball player. They just haven't been as consistent as we might have wanted to see. But obviously there's only 5 spots that you can have to be on the court. So what kind of lineups is Archie going to see? Is he going to have a 3-guard system where he's going to have Rob, Khristian, Al on the floor, and then you've got in the other 2 spots maybe someone like a Justin Smith and a Trace Jackson Davis? Is he going to go, if you want to get just, again, cut and dry, a 2-guard lineup, 3-player forward lineup where you've got Rob and Al, or Khristian and Al, and you've got someone like Justin, and then you got Race and Trace or something like that? Matt, what kind of lineups? And I think it's obviously gonna, if we move past maybe even the beginning of the year, Khristian, maybe even if he sits on the bench just to start out the year, just as he gets used to the system, what kind of, when we're getting into Big Ten play, what kind of lineups do you see with revolving Khristian? Is he going to be starting, or if he is starting, what kind of lineups are we going to see? Are we going to see smaller or bigger or somewhere in the middle?
I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle, honestly. That's probably the best answer. I do think he's starting. I'd be surprised if he wasn't. He's a 5-star talent, and he's coming in. Look, I told you he's playing like up a year, right? And he's a year younger than everybody. Look, the reason why he reclassified is probably because he was told he's got a starting spot and or he can compete for it. So I'm believing in his talent that he'll be starting. So it'll be Rob Finney, him. Then I'm looking at somebody at the 3, like a Jerome Hunter, maybe a Justin Smith at the 3. And then I'm looking at a Race Thompson, then Trace Jackson Davis at the 4 and 5. I don't think you're going to be seeing Joey Brunk starting if you're going to have the 2 guards, just because obviously Trace needs to be out in the court, and you need more people to stretch the floor. Justin Smith hasn't proved that he can stretch the floor yet. Race Thompson has shown promise that he can, and at least in high school and previously. So he's going to be somebody that I'm going to be looking at to help come in and stretch the floor, because you can't just have 2 shooters out there in Finney and Khristian Lander. And then, whoever you want to put at the 3 is fine. I put Justin Smith just because he's going to be a senior. I can see somebody like Jerome Hunter being there. I can even see at times, like not in the starting lineup, but coming in at times, somebody like an Anthony Leal to bring in a bit of a shooting punch, or playing a 3rd guard like Al, who's a bit bigger. It was 6'4" at the 3. But if I had to put my money on it, I'd assume that Lander might not be starting day 1, but he'll eventually begin starting. So it's going to be my starting lineup. I'll repeat it again for those who are maybe a little bit confused. Rob Finney, Khristian Lander, got Justin Smith, Race Thompson, Trace Jackson Davis. I really want to put Jerome Hunter at the 3, but I just feel like Archie's going to go defensively with the 3rd position just because you're going to be lacking size with a 2 6'2", 2 6'3" guards. And he's going to want some defense in there. So I'm going to put Justin Smith at 3. But I can see Jerome Hunter being in there.
We can also wait to see how Jerome develops too. Like if he explodes, obviously things will change. But if it's like a normal trajectory, I get what you mean for that.
Yeah. Justin Smith's got to be in there, Matt, if he's going to be second team All Big Ten.
Well, I said if your prediction comes true, then he is.
He better be in there, or else, there's going to be a little bit more turmoil than I would like. I disagree with you, Matt. I've seen Archie Miller stay pretty stubborn with his lineup choices, and this might upset some people listening. But as far as opening night is concerned, I think it's going to be the same starting 5 that you saw kind of frequently last season with Finney and Durham in the backcourt, and Smith,
starting
Jackson
5 is coming back.
Smith, Jackson Davis, and Brunk in the front court. Look, as much as I would love to see a 3-guard lineup, or maybe throw in a couple of interesting wing options out there at the same time, I just felt like Archie Miller was stubborn in playing 2 bigs last season and 2 guards and a wing, and that's what I see happening now. On that note, Archie Miller has also been very clear that just because he starts a certain group of 5, it doesn't mean those 5 guys are going to get the most minutes, and you might see that fluctuate over the course of the season. Could Khristian Lander start in Big Ten play or the NCAA tournament play if things go well? Sure. But as far as opening night's concerned, I think I kind of see the old faithful starting 5 with Finney, Durham, Smith, Jackson Davis, and Brunk.
At the very beginning of the season, I agree, Nathan, especially like we've said, if this team can't get together even for those summer workouts, because about now school is ending, Archie will give them like a week or 2 off sometimes, and then they'll come back. And even since practice officially can't start, remember they can still have workouts together with Cliff Marshall. You see all of those. Remember that's when IU media is like at its peak, because we get all those off-season workout videos. And we get so pumped because they don't miss a shot in the workout video, obviously. blah blah blah. But they can't even get together for, what is it, like 5 people at a time in the summer, where you can be like in the gym with the coach at a time, and they rotate and yada yada yada. Even if they can't get together like that, I think at the very, very, very beginning of the season, even if they can get together, if things were like normal, I could see Khristian coming off the bench just because he's a freshman, and you don't see very many freshmen, at least in Archie's systems, even before he was at IU, coming and starting from day one. Obviously, Romeo was an exception, but I think pretty quickly he's going to come into it, and then I think he's gonna replace Al, I think, in the starting lineup. And I think Al, and again, just like Matt mentioned, how that doesn't necessarily mean the amount of minutes you play, or the start, you being starting doesn't mean that you're going to play the most amount of minutes. As we saw with Joey, he started most of the time but didn't get a majority of the minutes. I think Al's going to come and have a usage rate, again, not basketball-wise, but a usage rate, minutes rate as of kind of Devontae Green did last year, where you've got Rob and Khristian coming and starting, and then Al comes in and kind of trades off of them as maybe that first player off the bench, depending on how some other people develop. But then, like Matt said, you kind of rotate both of those players in and out to where you've got Rob being on the court while Khristian takes a break. And again, it overlaps, but then Khristian's on the court while Rob takes a break. So I agree with you guys, more of the traditional, if you just want to give them 2 guards, 3 forwards, just cut and dry more or less, and with obviously some splashes of lineups here and there, but just generically. You guys, anything else to add with lineups for that, or is that pretty much?
Yeah, well, I like what BMC's comment is there. Look, starting lineup is one thing, but role players, bench is going to be a huge plus for Indiana this coming season, assuming everything goes to schedule. Those guys from 6 to 10 are going to be the group, whoever those guys are, that's going to be the group that really separates Indiana from a lot of its competition. Because, when you compare starting 5 to starting 5 across the Big Ten, it's probably pretty equal. In fact, there are going to be a few teams that have a better starting lineup without question. But that second wave is what's going to really help the Hoosiers. And Khristian Lander starting off the bench, beginning the season coming off the bench, I think could be really helpful for his development, because what that means is he's going up against some weaker competition, really get his confidence going, really help his development. So that's what I see happening there.
Yeah, and just to reference that comment, he said, BMC said, how about the second five pre-conference of Khristian Lander, Jerome Hunter, Race Thompson, Armand Franklin, Leal/Geronimo. I'll take that 5, and I totally agree. Especially, like you said, you give those vets that already know the system, that have at least seen some sort of success at the end of the year with what Archie was starting to get going before everything finished. You give those guys basically go with what you know, even if practice is going to be cut short over the year, and then you see how things develop. So, yeah, I agree with that. All right, Matt, we'll kick it over to you for our social media shout-out of the week. We like to give some social media shout-outs so you guys can go follow various, whether it's basketball or football, or if it's even on all the way down to baseball, soccer, softball, any other type of sports, any big social media things that happen this week, go follow them. So, Matt, who are you shouting out this week?
Well, the easy shout out would be Khristian Lander committing and his hype video that he tweeted out. So if you haven't followed,
on TikTok.
And on TikTok. So if you haven't followed him on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, wherever he's at, that's at Khristian Lander. My social media shout out for this week is I'm going a little bit of different direction. We're going to go to a friend of the show. So we're going to our friend IU Andrew. That's Andrew Brown at IU Andrew on Twitter. He is part of the Cuban Center at IU, and he works for men's basketball, men's baseball, men's soccer, and then women's basketball. So he's done all the behind-the-scenes videotaping for them. So whenever you see a nice, fancy video, hype video for a new game, for whether it's women's basketball or men's basketball, Andrew is probably working behind it. And it's the end of the year, and all the sports are done, and he's got the summer to look forward to. But I thought we'd shout him out because he just put an end-of-the-year hype tape out on his Twitter. So that's at IU Andrew on Twitter. So go check him out. Go give him a follow. Go say hi. Say hi from Hoosier Sound. He'll probably be really surprised and really happy once you hear this on the podcast. So yeah, hi Andrew. Social media shout out. Also follow us on social media. That's at the Hoosier Sound and at Indiana HQ on Twitter and on Instagram. So go find us.
Yep. All right. 2 quick ending thoughts as we wrap up this podcast. We're going to talk about basically what should we do with the final scholarship that the Hoosiers have for next season, and then talk about if anyone should potentially redshirt. My quick thought on the final scholarship, Nathan, is that I think we should just bank it for now, since Archie last season it worked with banking 2 scholarships. You know, even the deepest of coaches who go really deep onto their bench don't even get all the way to that 13th scholarship. So I say bank it unless a impact crazy grad transfer comes in and can give you, if anything, even just practice time, like another body to go against, if at minimum for that practice time, for some more competition in the locker room and on the practice court, even if they're not going to see time. But I say bank it just for now, and then kind of see where it goes. If they get a guy, great. If they don't, great.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's a wrong answer to this, in all honesty.
Agreed. Yeah.
It's interesting, right? And you talked about surprising transfers hitting the wire. We saw that last week, didn't we? When Nogel Eastern all of a sudden sent out a statement, said
situation.
he's leaving Purdue, and then the next day he went to Michigan, and now Michigan's apparently Michigan hasn't formally introduced him yet. So again, it's one of those cases where you never know, right? And if there is an impact player available that comes up all of a sudden who can help Indiana next fall, I think Archie Miller really needs to at least exhaust that option. In other words, take a look at it. Mm-hmm.
Or a potential decommit
from
somewhere
decommit
else.
Or something
you
like
just
that.
Never know.
Hmm. Well, exactly. And that's where, I think Archie Miller's got to do his due diligence Make sure he really examines the type of stuff, because I think Indiana can be a really good basketball team next year. So if you can go out and add a piece, specifically a guy in the front court, I think that's something Indiana's got to look at now with Deron Davis graduating. All of a sudden, you're a little bit thin up front with Trace Jackson Davis, Race Thompson, and Joey Brunk. It would not hurt to have an extra big man inside, especially if you can get him immediately eligible. So I would lean that route. But again, when I look at it big picture, there really isn't a wrong answer to that question.
Totally agree.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's not a wrong answer. However, my personal preference is that we bring in a big man. We only have 2 bigs right now. It would really make me comfortable as a fan if we found a third big. I mean, when I mean big, I mean like center and or a power forward that can play the 5. Somebody that can play the 5, because asking Trace Jackson Davis and Joey Brunk to split minutes at the 5 is fine. I think it's good for Trace's NBA future if he can show he can play minutes at the 5. However, that being said, depth and injury insurance, that is all I'm saying. It would make me feel a lot more comfortable.
I think it would make everyone feel comfortable with how injuries have gone recently.
Yes.
But yeah, that's a great point. If it's going to be someone, I'd rather it be a bigger guy, whether it's a center like someone like Joey or Deron, or if it's like a Thomas Bryant who is a bigger but can also extend out onto the line. I would agree, Matt, as well. But if it comes, great. If it doesn't, all right. Should anyone redshirt? And that's a great question. I think first, is it safe to say if anyone potentially would redshirt, guys, that it would probably be one of the incoming freshmen, if anything? Would you agree with that?
I concur. I think
no. Here's.
Go ahead, Nathan. Go ahead. I want your hot.
You go first, Matt.
Okay, I'll go first. So I think it's going to be one of the freshmen, and honestly,
if like it doesn't like they don't have to, like if anyone should.
Okay, if anybody redshirts, it's going to be one of the 2 of Galloway or Geronimo. One of the G's is going to take a redshirt if they're going to redshirt at all. I just think when you look at the position that they play, which is Geronimo plays the 3 and the 4. And Galloway plays the 2 and the 3, but like he's a 3. He's a small forward. There's such depth and such an ability to mend lineups, like we're talking about. If we're starting 2 guards, are we playing 3 guards? Are we playing a 2-guard lineup with 2 point guards? Then who's the 3 going to be? Is it going to be a smaller 3? Is it going to be a guy that can shoot? Both of them. Geronimo's known for the ability to shoot, but he's a bit of a rough around the edges prospect. And Galloway has shown the ability to shoot in the past, but has been slightly inconsistent. And while I'm very excited for both of what they bring, one of the 2 is going to be the odd man sitting out and getting 0 minutes this year, and or 1 or 2 minutes at the end of the game, or in the middle of the game when somebody needs a breather. I would rather them redshirt a year and take a year to develop like a Race Thompson did, in order to save an extra year of eligibility down the road, so that they can be a bigger part of the team next year when some of the minutes free up when somebody like Justin Smith leaves and Trace Jackson Davis leaves for the draft. So that's my opinion on that. However, I doubt that either of them redshirt.
Yeah, I agree with that. In other words, I'm not sure if anyone will redshirt, especially with an open scholarship out there. The one returning player that I would not be shocked if he elected a redshirt is Armaan Franklin. And when I look at Khristian Lander coming in, I immediately ask the question, well, his playing time probably has to come at the expense of someone else. And when I look at what Armaan Franklin did last year, there's no question that Franklin is a player with a lot of potential. And you even saw that in the 2 Bankers Life Fieldhouse games that he played in last season where he scored double digits. But Armaan Franklin last season also saw Demezy Anderson start as a very sort of rotational piece and then basically become absent at the back half of the season. And unfortunately now Franklin looks at Demezy Anderson and says, well, now Anderson's transferring, which means he probably has to sit out another year. And basically the question that I'm wondering with Franklin is, could he redshirt, save that year of eligibility, and then really hit the gas starting in the fall of 2021? I'm not saying it's going to happen. It's just something that wouldn't shock me. At the end of the day, I don't think anyone will end up redshirting.
That's an idea, yeah. I mean, I kind of forgot about Armaan Franklin for better or for worse because we didn't even really talk about him too much in any of the lineup stuff just because you're right. He's kind of been, whether any of us have meant to or not, he's kind of been pushed aside with all of this just because as a good thing for the program, not for him himself, the talent's getting better as Archie's recruiting, which is a good thing because then obviously you get a guy like Armaan Franklin on a typical year for a lot of schools, you'd say that that's a great recruit. But if he's getting pushed farther and farther down, then we're the talent and the level of play on the court is getting higher and higher for this team, which is obviously what we all want to see. But again, like Nathan said, at the expense of someone, which I agree, I could see that being a potential option. I agree with both of you. When it's all said and done, I don't think anyone necessarily will, just because if it were football rules where you've got, hey, this guy can play 4 games or part of 4 games and then redshirt, that would be awesome. I think basketball should take that. That's a wonderful idea for football. We've heard it from us multiple times. It's an awesome idea. So those guys at the very end of the bench can get that extra year. Those guys that, hey, that extra year of eligibility would really, really do them a lot of good, which, like you said, Nathan, would be the guy like Armaan Franklin. But like you both said, and like I said, I don't think anyone will, just because those non-conference games, since some of those quote-unquote cupcake games can get out there so much, and this team is going to have some experience, especially experience together, that I'm predicting, and I think a lot of the end of the games, especially in those cupcake non-conference games, we're going to see the starters sitting out and the first 7 or 8 guys sitting out a lot earlier. You can still get some valuable minutes, and technically, since in basketball, if you play, it burns your year of eligibility, obviously minus some of the injury stuff. But anyway, if you play, it kind of burns that year of eligibility. So I think just with the amount of potential non-conference minutes that they can get at the very end, I don't think anyone's necessarily going to redshirt. But I agree with both of you. If we're going to talk about specific guys, the 2 guys that Matt mentioned, those could be some people that could potentially be on there if they wanted to. And like Nathan said, one of those returning guys. And Jeff in the chat, we asked them about, hey, what they thought about anyone redshirting. And he said, slippery slope when you redshirt. Yeah, it is. When recruits say possibility of redshirting for your first year, he's right. He said, no, kids don't want to necessarily hear that. It's kind of because everyone's going to get a little more patient. He said, yeah, it's kind of now and then they move on. So yeah, it's kind of, you want to play, you want to be competitive and not necessarily redshirt.
Yeah. On that note, I was talking about Franklin a couple minutes ago. I think his attitude has been pretty impressive so far. All the comments you're hearing out of him specifically, and really across the board, it seems like one of the things Archie Miller recruits is character. So, if there is a tough conversation that has to be had, I think Armaan Franklin is somebody with him and his support system who would be willing to listen, which is, half the battle in all honesty. So that's a good point by Jeff. It does seem to be that way where like redshirting, it used to be a pretty common practice up until probably the one and done era started. And then it seemed like there was some kind of stigma, and that really doesn't need to be the case. You have only 4 years of eligibility in the NCAA. You want to make sure you maximize the most out of those.
Yep. And for the redshirt stuff, it's just kind of a topic that we wanted to discuss. There was no inside information coming from us. We're not even predicting that anyone's going to redshirt, just a topic to put out there. But that's going to wrap it up for 142nd show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us, especially that live audience coming out and chatting. It makes it a lot more interesting when you guys come out and chat. Thank you for putting up with all of our audio or technical difficulties with all the COVID-19 stuff. Live shows are a lot harder to do because everyone's on the internet and it just backlogs internet in general. And if you noticed last week, my audio was terrible. This week, Nathan was cutting in and out, and we're doing the same stuff. When you get a clean show, we're not doing anything different to try and change it. So thank you for bearing with us with all that. And as you've seen, podcasts aren't getting produced to you until about 12 or 16 hours later than normal, it's because it can't process as quick. I'm getting it to you as quick as the internet will let me. But again, thank you all so much for joining us. News and updates come through Twitter, so subscribe to that. You get a lot of extra stuff. I'm sporting some awesome merch that I got the notification from Indiana HQ that there was a 60% up to 60% off sale on IU last week. Take advantage of that. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Turn the bell on so you can see when we go live at 8:30 so you can come talk to us. But most importantly, though, if you enjoy our show, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Facebook is the easiest. That's really how you can try and grow our podcast. So if you got any IU basketball, IU sports fans in general, hey, give us a shout out. That's really how we grow this podcast so we can reach all those passionate IU fans such as yourself, and we really appreciate it. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.